While performing surgery on a woman, an experienced doctor finds a strange object in her body, and when he decides to investigate, he cannot believe what happened. Dr. Jonathan Parker, a renowned surgeon, started his day like any other at St. Mary's Hospital. The aroma of fresh coffee filled the doctor's break room, where Jonathan was reviewing his patients' records. Among them was Emily Thompson, a 28-year-old woman with unexplained abdominal pain. Known for his precision and calm under pressure, Jonathan prepared for the surgery with the same meticulousness as always, not imagining that this operation would change his life. The operating room was impeccably clean, the lights reflecting off the surgical instruments. The medical team, all under Jonathan's leadership, moved with the synchronicity of a well-rehearsed ballet. With Emily anesthetized and the operation underway, everything seemed to go as planned. However, as he explored the abdominal cavity, Jonathan felt something unusual. A slight metallic glint caught his attention. "This shouldn't be here," murmured Jonathan, frowning. His experienced hands moved carefully, revealing a small metallic object deeply embedded in Emily's tissue. The surprise filled the room. Nurses and assistants exchanged puzzled glances while Jonathan, always calm and composed, felt the first wave of doubt and curiosity. He cleaned the object, revealing a smooth, shiny surface. "Has anyone ever seen anything like this before?" Jonathan asked, his voice firm but laden with concern. The following silence was broken only by the sound of heart monitors. No one had answers, and Jonathan knew he needed to understand what he had found before proceeding. Determined to ensure Emily's safety, Jonathan continued the operation with the same precision that had made him famous. The metallic object was carefully removed and placed in a sterilized container for later analysis. "Let's finish the surgery and make sure she's okay," he said, regaining control of the situation. However, his mind was elsewhere, fixated on that unexpected enigma. After the surgery, Jonathan retreated to his office, a cozy space filled with medical books and framed certificates. He placed the metallic device on his desk and observed it attentively. What was that? How did it end up in Emily's body? Each question seemed to generate more mystery, and Jonathan knew he could not leave this unanswered. Meanwhile, Emily rested in the recovery room, unaware of the whirlwind of thoughts occupying her surgeon's mind. Jonathan decided that he would need to confront her about the object as soon as she was able to talk. But how to approach such a strange and potentially disturbing matter? He took a deep breath, trying to prepare for the difficult conversation to come. Jonathan Parker could not shake the unease caused by the metallic device found in Emily's body. The object was now carefully stored in a sterilized container on his desk. Night was already falling over the city, and the hospital, usually a place of constant movement, seemed eerily silent. Jonathan felt a chill run down his spine as he stared intently at the enigmatic object. Jonathan took out his laptop, connected to the hospital's sophisticated analysis system, and began a detailed examination of the device. The initial readings were baffling. The technology seemed too advanced for anything known in contemporary medicine. With each new discovery, Jonathan's curiosity grew, along with a sense of something much larger lurking. As he adjusted the analysis instruments, a surprising detail caught his attention. The device was active. Small pulses of light emanated from its interior as if it were functioning somehow. Jonathan, with quickened breath, connected a cable to the device to obtain more information. The data began to flow, revealing a complex pattern he could barely comprehend. The computer monitor flashed with information that made no immediate sense. Jonathan increased the resolution of the data, trying to identify some pattern. It was then that he noticed something alarming. The device was transmitting data in real time. Jonathan blinked, incredulous, watching the numbers running across the screen. This was not just a piece of metal. It was an active transmitter. Jonathan quickly activated a tracking program to locate the origin and destination of the transmission. His heart raced as the analysis progressed. The revealed coordinates pointed to a distant location, in an area Jonathan did not recognize. The constant flow of data indicated that someone, somewhere, was monitoring everything the device captured. A knock on the door interrupted his thoughts. It was the head nurse, Martha, a maternal figure always concerned with everyone's well-being. "Dr. Parker, is everything okay?" "You seem disturbed," she said in a gentle but worried tone. Jonathan, hesitating, closed the laptop and tried to remain calm. "I'm fine, Martha. Just something intriguing I need to solve." After Martha left, Jonathan returned to his work, but the feeling of being watched now deeply troubled him. He knew he needed to share this discovery with someone he trusted, but who to turn to? Each step he took seemed to involve him more in a web of mysteries. Jonathan picked up the phone and dialed the number of an old friend, Dr. Alan Roberts, a specialist in advanced medical technologies. "Alan, I need your help with something unusual," said Jonathan, trying to control the tension in his voice. Alan, on the other end of the line, was intrigued. "Of course, Jonathan. What is it about?" Jonathan quickly explained the situation, omitting details until he could meet his friend in person. They arranged to meet the next morning away from the curious eyes of the hospital. The night advanced slowly, and Jonathan could hardly sleep. Every shadow seemed to hide a new secret, and the day's events continued to haunt him. He knew he was dealing with something that could have implications far beyond his current understanding. However, the uncertainty did not diminish his determination to uncover the truth. The next day, Jonathan met with Alan at a small discreet cafe, where the sounds of cups and the murmur of conversations created a comfortable environment. "Show me the device," asked Alan, his curiosity evident. Jonathan carefully took the object out of a lined bag and placed it on the table. Alan, adjusting his glasses, examined the device carefully. "This is impressive, Jonathan," said Alan after a few minutes. "I've never seen anything like this. The technology is very advanced, almost as if it were not from this time." Jonathan nodded, feeling the same unease that had accompanied him since the surgery. "The most worrying," he continued, "is that the device is transmitting data to an external source. We need to find out who is receiving this information and why." Alan suggested that they take the device to his private laboratory, where they could conduct a more in-depth analysis without the risk of being observed. Jonathan agreed, feeling a slight relief in having someone he trusted by his side. As they left the cafe, a hooded figure watched from a distance, speaking discreetly on the phone. Jonathan and Alan did not know, but their lives were about to intertwine even more deeply with the mystery they were trying to unravel. Back at Alan's laboratory, the detailed analysis of the device began. Each new discovery revealed layers of complexity that defied the understanding of the two doctors. The transmitted data seemed to be encoded, and the origin of the transmission remained obscure. "Whoever did this knew exactly what they were doing," said Alan, his eyes shining with fascination and concern. Jonathan Parker walked through the hospital corridor, his mind still wrapped in thoughts about the device found in Emily. The fluorescent lights cast a cold glow on the white walls, reflecting the sterility of the environment. Each step he took echoed the weight of the discovery and the unresolved mystery. He needed to talk to Emily. He needed answers, even if those answers were hard to hear. Emily was slowly waking up from anesthesia when Jonathan entered the room. The curtains were partially open, letting the soft morning light infiltrate the space. She blinked, adjusting to the brightness in the presence of the surgeon beside her. "Dr. Parker," she murmured, her voice weak. "How did the surgery go?" Jonathan pulled up a chair and sat beside the bed, trying to formulate his words carefully. "The surgery was a success, Emily," he began in a reassuring tone. "But we found something unexpected." He paused, observing her reactions. Emily frowned, confusion reflecting in her eyes. "What did you find?" "During the surgery, we discovered a small metallic device in your abdomen," said Jonathan, watching closely every nuance of her expression. "Do you have any idea how this might have ended up in your body?" Emily's eyes widened, the shock clearly visible. "A metallic device?" "No. I have no idea," she replied, her voice trembling. The silence that followed was heavy, full of unspoken questions and unvoiced fears. Jonathan knew he needed to go deeper, but also understood that Emily was as lost as he was. "I know it's scary," he said softly. But we need to understand how this happened. Do you remember any previous surgery or incident that might be related? Emily shook her head, tears beginning to form in her eyes. No, nothing that I can remember. My life has been normal except for these abdominal pains that started out of nowhere. Jonathan felt a knot form in his stomach. The lack of answers only made everything more mysterious and disturbing. He squeezed Emily's hand, trying to offer some comfort. We'll figure this out together, Emily. I promise. At that moment, the head nurse, Martha, entered the room to check Emily's vital signs. Is everything all right here? She asked, noticing the tension in the air. Jonathan nodded, but his gaze remained fixed on Emily. We're fine, Martha. Just trying to understand some things. Martha gave a comforting smile and continued with her work, her presence bringing a bit of normalcy to the emotional chaos. After Martha left, Jonathan turned his full attention to Emily. I'm going to need to do some more tests and maybe ask some additional questions if you're okay with that, he said. Emily agreed, although the concern was still evident on her face. I trust you, Dr. Parker. Do whatever is necessary. Jonathan left the room, his mind buzzing with possibilities. He knew he needed more information, and quickly. Back in his office, he began reviewing Emily's medical records, looking for any clue that might have been overlooked. Every line of the report seemed to scream at him, increasing his frustration at the lack of clear answers. Meanwhile, Emily was trying to process what had been revealed. Every moment of her recent life ran through her mind, looking for any clue, any detail that might explain the device. Anxiety mixed with fear, and she felt lost in a sea of uncertainties. How could something so strange have happened to her without her noticing? Jonathan Parker was on his usual way home after another long and exhausting day at the hospital. The night was falling gently, and the streets were quiet, illuminated by streetlights that cast long shadows. As he walked, Jonathan felt an uncomfortable sensation of being watched. He looked over his shoulder but saw no one. Trying to shake off the paranoia, he continued on his way, but the feeling persisted. In the following days, this sensation intensified. Jonathan noticed indistinct figures in his peripheral vision, shadows that quickly disappeared when he turned his head. Was he imagining things? The discovery of the metallic device and the lack of answers from Emily were beginning to affect his peace of mind. Even so, he could not ignore the growing sense of danger. One morning, as he left his house, Jonathan saw a man in a dark suit standing across the street, seemingly distracted. But his eyes followed him in a calculated way. Jonathan got into his car, trying not to show the discomfort he felt. He drove through the morning traffic but could not help looking in the rearview mirror. The same man in the dark suit was a few blocks behind, following him in a black sedan. At the hospital, the routine seemed normal, but Jonathan could not shake the feeling of being watched. During a break, he casually mentioned his growing concern to Alan. Have you ever had the feeling of being followed? He asked, trying to sound unconcerned. Alan raised an eyebrow, noticing the seriousness in Jonathan's eyes. What's going on, Jonathan? Are you all right? Jonathan hesitated, choosing his words carefully. Ever since we found that device in Emily, I feel like something is wrong. I think I'm being followed. Alan frowned, clearly worried. This is serious, Jonathan. We need to find out who's behind this. Have you taken any precautions? Jonathan shook his head, knowing he was dealing with something far beyond his experience. That night, Jonathan decided to test his theory. After leaving the hospital, he took several unnecessary turns through the city, passing through busy streets and quiet alleys. The black sedan appeared again in his rearview mirror, confirming his fears. He accelerated, trying to lose the pursuer, but the car continued to follow him relentlessly. Jonathan knew he needed help, and quickly. Jonathan drove to a busy location, a shopping mall filled with people. He parked the car and hurried inside, blending into the crowd. Looking around discreetly, he saw two men in suits also entering, their eyes scanning the space. Jonathan knew he could not stay there for long. He needed a plan. He picked up his phone and called Alan. Meet me in the underground parking lot of the mall. I'm in trouble. Alan arrived quickly, parking his car next to Jonathan's. "What's going on?" he asked, the concern evident in his voice. Jonathan explained quickly, discreetly pointing to the men who were still searching for him. "They've been following me since the hospital. I don't know what they want, but it's not good." Alan nodded, his face becoming serious. "Let's get out of here. I have a place where we can talk safely." The two got into Alan's car, which left the parking lot quickly. Jonathan looked back, seeing the men in suits disappear into the mall's chaos. "Do you think they're after the device?" Alan asked, as he drove to a safe location. Jonathan nodded, feeling the weight of the situation increase. "I don't see any other explanation. We need to figure out what's going on before it's too late." At Alan's hideout, a small cabin outside the city, the two doctors began to plan their next steps. "We need more information about this device," Alan said, placing the metallic object on the table, "and we need to find out who these people are and what they want." Jonathan agreed, his mind working at full speed. The feeling of being at a crucial crossroads was inescapable. He knew that the discovery of the device had triggered a series of events that could change their lives forever. The next morning, Jonathan woke up with a sense of urgency. Upon arriving at the hospital, he noticed something different in the air. The usual movement was charged with palpable tension. The nurses, who usually greeted him with warm smiles, now seemed distracted, with nervous glances and hurried gestures. Jonathan felt a knot in his stomach. Something was definitely wrong. As he walked through the corridors, Jonathan noticed small details that did not fit the hospital's normal routine. Security cameras he had never seen before were discreetly installed in the corners. Additional security guards with stern expressions patrolled the floors. He tried to ignore the growing feeling of discomfort, but could not shake the sense that the hospital was under surveillance. Jonathan entered the operating room to prepare for a morning procedure, but noticed that the atmosphere among his colleagues was strange. Dr. Lewis, usually talkative and friendly, was quiet and avoided eye contact. Nurse Jane, always cheerful, seemed restless, constantly looking over her shoulder. "Did something happen?" Jonathan asked casually, trying to probe the situation. Jane only gave a tense smile, murmuring, "Everything is fine, Dr. Parker." In the doctor's lounge, Jonathan found Alan, who seemed equally disturbed. "Have you noticed anything strange today?" Jonathan asked, sitting next to his friend. Alan nodded, his face grave. "Yes. It seems like the hospital has been invaded. I heard rumors that some people were seen messing with the files during the night. And they're not just rumors, Jonathan. I saw the security guards removing documents." Jonathan felt a shiver down his spine. "We need to find out what's going on," he said, lowering his voice. "Let's investigate discreetly. If we're caught, we could be in danger." Alan agreed, and the two left the room, trying to appear as normal as possible. The atmosphere of suspicion and fear was almost suffocating, but they knew they had to act. Jonathan decided to start with the administrative floor. He and Alan walked to the records room but were stopped by two new security guards. "Sorry, gentlemen, this area is restricted today," said one of the men, his tone firm. Jonathan tried to argue but realized he would not succeed. They retreated, exchanging worried glances. "This is worse than we thought," Alan murmured. Later, while Jonathan was reviewing patient records, he noticed that several files were missing. Important documents about Emily Thompson had disappeared. He felt his heart race. Who would be interested in these files and why? Every clue seemed to lead him deeper into an intricate and dangerous mystery. Jonathan knew he could not trust anyone except Alan. The following days were a blur of growing tension. Colleagues he had known for years began to act strangely, as if they were being watched or threatened. Dr. Miller, a veteran surgeon who had always been a mentor to Jonathan, now seemed distant and evasive. When asked about the recent security increase, he only gave vague responses. Precautionary measures. One night, after all the patients had been attended to and the hospital was starting to quiet down, Jonathan decided to take a closer look at the restricted area. He and Alan managed to sneak in, taking advantage of a breach in the security guard's vigilance. Inside, they discovered several boxes of files rummaged through and computers with monitors still on. It looks like they're looking for something specific, whispered Alan. Suddenly they heard footsteps approaching. Jonathan and Alan hid behind a file shelf, holding their breath. Two men entered, talking in low, tense voices. "We need to find these files before they do," said one of them. "If they find out, everything will be lost." Jonathan felt his heart hammer in his chest. The mystery was deepening, and they were in the middle of a conspiracy much larger than they had imagined. Jonathan Parker was in a constant state of vigilance, his nerves on edge. The hospital invasion and his colleagues' strange behaviors had turned his workplace into a minefield. He began to see enemies everywhere. Dr. Miller, who had once been his mentor, now seemed a stranger, his answers always evasive and distant. In the break room, Jonathan tried to focus on a coffee, but the tense atmosphere did not help. The conversations around him were muffled and full of whispers. Nurse Jane, who had always been a close friend, now avoided him, her eyes filled with a restlessness he could not decipher. Jonathan noticed that she averted her gaze whenever he entered the room. One afternoon, Jonathan found himself alone in the elevator with Dr. Lewis. The silence between them was heavy. Jonathan broke the ice. "Lewis, have you noticed anything strange lately?" he asked, trying to probe. Dr. Lewis just shook his head, but his eyes did not meet Jonathan's. "I don't know what you're talking about, Jonathan. Everything is normal for me." The lie was obvious. Jonathan began to question his own perceptions. Could it be that he was imagining things? But the constant feeling of being watched, the furtive glances, and the presence of extra security reinforced his suspicions. He knew something big was happening, something that could put everyone in danger, but he did not know whom to trust. Things reached a critical point when Alan, his only confidant, began to act strangely. Jonathan noticed that Alan was meeting with unknown people outside the hospital, and his phone calls became more frequent and full of secrets. Jonathan confronted Alan one night, but he only said, "I'm trying to protect you, Jonathan. Some things are better if you don't know." This response did not calm Jonathan. On the contrary, it increased his paranoia. He began to feel isolated, with a growing sense of betrayal. If even Alan was not on his side, who would be? He decided that he needed to be careful with everything and everyone, keeping his movements calculated and discreet. Jonathan knew he could count on no one but himself. Jonathan Parker knew he needed to act fast. The recent events at the hospital and the growing distrust among his colleagues led him to an inevitable conclusion. He could not solve this alone. He decided that the only person he could really trust was Emily Thompson. He found her at her house, a small and cozy residence away from the city's hustle and bustle. Emily was still recovering but was eager for answers. "Emily, we need to talk," said Jonathan, entering the living room. Emily, sitting on the couch with a blanket over her shoulders, looked at him with curious eyes. "I also want to understand what's happening, Dr. Parker," she replied, trying to hide the anxiety in her voice. Jonathan quickly explained the recent events, the invasion of the hospital, and how his colleagues had started acting strangely. "I don't know whom to trust anymore, but I know we need help," said Jonathan, his voice low but determined. "There's something big going on here, something that involves more than just the two of us." Emily nodded, feeling the weight of Jonathan's words. "So, what do we do now?" she asked, determination beginning to shine in her eyes. Jonathan smiled slightly. "We need to find someone who understands this technology." Jonathan remembered a group of renegade scientists he had met years ago during a medical conference. They were known for their radical ideas and for working outside the boundaries of conventional science. If anyone could help them decipher the mystery of the device, it would be them. Jonathan made a few phone calls and managed to arrange a meeting in a secret location. The meeting took place in an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of the city. Jonathan and Emily arrived early, anxious and nervous. The warehouse was dark and damp, with only a few beams of light coming through the broken windows. Soon, 3 figures emerged from the shadows. Dr. Samuel Hayes, a legend in the field of bioengineering. Lara Evans, a former NASA scientist with a talent for theoretical physics. and Michael Ross, a brilliant hacker now working in cybersecurity. "Jonathan, it's good to see you," said Dr. Hayes, shaking Jonathan's hand with a smile. "I heard you're in trouble." Jonathan explained the situation, showing them the device. Lara took the object and examined it carefully. "This is unbelievable," she murmured, her eyes wide with surprise. "I've never seen anything like this before." Michael, on the other hand, was already typing furiously on his laptop, trying to access any possible data. While the scientists worked, Jonathan and Emily talked apart. "Do you think we can trust them?" asked Emily, the worry evident in her voice. Jonathan looked at the scientists, now immersed in their tasks. "They are our best chance. We need them as much as they need this mystery to solve." Emily nodded, realizing the gravity of the situation. Hours passed and the warehouse was filled with murmurs and keyboard clicks. Finally, Dr. Hayes approached with a serious expression. "Jonathan, Emily, you're dealing with something much bigger than you imagine. This device is not only advanced, it's something that transcends our current understanding of technology." The revelation was both exciting and terrifying. "So, what do we do now?" asked Jonathan, trying to process the information. Lara replied, "We're going to need more time to analyze this completely, but we're all at risk. Whoever is behind this will stop at nothing." Michael looked at them, his expression grave. "We need to be extremely careful. Our movements are being watched." "This is incredibly advanced," murmured Lara, as she adjusted an electronic magnifying glass to examine the device's internal circuits. "The materials used here are unknown to us. The nanotechnology involved is beyond anything modern science can replicate." Jonathan and Emily exchanged worried looks. The discovery was becoming increasingly unsettling. "I've managed to trace the origin of the signals," announced Michael, his eyes shining with the excitement of the discovery. "They're being sent to several servers around the world. We're dealing with a global espionage network." Jonathan felt the ground open beneath his feet. The gravity of the situation was becoming increasingly clear. "You mean these data are being used to spy on people in different countries?" he asked. "Exactly," replied Michael. "Emily's device is just one piece of a much larger puzzle. It seems we're dealing with an organization that has the resources to implant these devices in several people around the world." Dr. Hayes frowned, absorbing the information. "This is a violation of privacy on an unimaginable scale. Whoever is behind this has sinister intentions." Lara Evans, the theoretical physicist, suggested that they investigate further into the data recipients. "If we track the servers, we can find out who is collecting this information," she said. Jonathan agreed. "We need to know who is behind this and why. This is our chance to expose this network and maybe even destroy it." Michael began to work with renewed fervor, using his skills to hack into the remote servers. With each new discovery, the picture became more disturbing. They found connections to governments, multinational corporations, and even paramilitary groups. The espionage network was vast and complex, involving powerful global players who benefited from the collected information. "This is bigger than we imagined," Emily said, her voice filled with awe and fear. "How can we fight something so vast and powerful?" Jonathan held her hand, conveying strength and determination. "We are not alone, Emily. We have each other, and more importantly, we have the truth. We will expose this network, no matter the cost." As they delved deeper into the investigation, they began to realize they were being watched. The mysterious figures following Jonathan became bolder, and the warehouse was targeted with break-in attempts. "We need to be more careful," Dr. Hayes warned. "They know we are getting close to the truth and will do anything to stop us." Jonathan and the group split into teams to avoid being captured together. They continued to work in secrecy, exchanging information only through secure means. Each new piece of information took them further down the rabbit hole, revealing a conspiracy involving espionage, control, and manipulation on an unimaginable scale. Michael, who had been typing furiously on his laptop, looked at the others with a look of amazement. I managed to decipher part of the code the device is transmitting. It is sending data on a frequency that is not used by any of our known communication systems. And more, the encryption is something I have never seen before, as if it were years ahead of our time. Jonathan, trying to process the information, asked, "But why would someone put this in Emily's body? What is the purpose?" Lara sighed, her eyes fixed on the device. "We are still trying to figure it out. It could be for monitoring, control, or even for biological experiments. The possibilities are disturbing." The warehouse was immersed in tense silence as Jonathan and his group analyzed the new data. Michael, with his laptop illuminating his face, suddenly stopped typing and looked at the others. "Guys, I think I found something," he said, his voice filled with disbelief. "There are mentions of human experiments." Jonathan felt a chill down his spine. "Human experiments? What are you talking about?" Michael turned the laptop screen so everyone could see. These documents describe tests conducted on involuntary people, using devices similar to the one found in Emily. They are manipulating bodies and minds for unknown purposes. Emily covered her mouth with her hand, horrified. "Was I a guinea pig in an experiment?" she asked, her voice trembling. Dr. Hayes, with a grave expression, replied, "It seems so, Emily. And you are not alone. There are records of several other people around the world." The revelation shed new light on the extent and cruelty of the conspiracy they were facing. Lara, always practical, suggested they analyze the effects of the experiments. "We need to understand what they are trying to achieve with these devices. Maybe we can find a pattern or a weakness." Jonathan agreed, knowing that this information could be crucial to exposing and destroying the espionage network. As they advanced in their analysis, they discovered that the experiments had sinister objectives. The devices not only monitored, but also influenced people's behavior and health. In some cases, the victims were driven to madness or terminal illness. "They are playing God," Michael said, anger evident in his voice. "And they are killing people in the process." Emily was struggling with a whirlwind of emotions. Why would they do this? Who would benefit from something so horrible? Lara looked at her sadly. Governments, corporations, any entity that wants absolute control. Imagine having the power to manipulate leaders, influence decisions, or eliminate adversaries without leaving a trace. Jonathan, trying to stay calm, knew they needed to act quickly. "We need these proofs to expose what is happening, but we also need to find and help the other victims. We cannot let them continue to suffer." The determination in his voice galvanized the group, who prepared to face the challenges ahead. The atmosphere in the warehouse was charged with desperate urgency. Each new piece of data revealed deepened the moral abyss of the conspiracy. "We have to be meticulous and quick," Dr. Hayes said. "Once they know we have this information, we will be the next targets. We need a solid plan to disclose everything to the public." Jonathan and Emily left the warehouse with their hearts racing and the determination to expose the truth. Every minute counted, and they knew the conspiracy was on high alert. They headed to the car, but before they could get in, a shot rang out, ricocheting off the metal. Jonathan pulled Emily to the ground, both crawling for cover behind a container. "We are being followed," Jonathan whispered, his eyes scanning for the shooter. Emily was breathing heavily, fear visible in her eyes. "What do we do now?" Jonathan held her hand, trying to convey safety. "We need to reach our contact in the press. They have the means to get this out. Quickly." Carefully, they sneaked out the opposite side of the warehouse and ran to the street. They found temporary refuge in a small, busy coffee shop, their heads lowered to avoid attracting attention. Jonathan took out his phone and made a quick call to his trusted media source, Mark Henderson. "Mark, it's urgent. I have evidence of a global conspiracy involving human experiments. We need to meet now." Mark, always skeptical, heard the urgency in Jonathan's voice and agreed to meet at a safe hotel across town. As they moved through the chaotic traffic, Emily constantly looked in the rearview mirror. "Are we being followed?" Jonathan, focused on the road, replied, "I can't be sure, but we have to assume we are." They changed directions several times, entering alleys and side streets to shake off any pursuers. The environment was charged with tension, every sound amplified by fear. Upon arriving at the hotel, Mark was already waiting in the lobby. He was a middle-aged man with a stern expression, someone who had seen the worst of the world and still maintained the hope of making a difference. "Jonathan, Emily, you are safe here for now," he said, leading them to a private room. Jonathan handed him a flash drive containing all the collected evidence. "This needs to go public immediately," he said, his voice firm. Mark looked at the files and his expression became grim. "If this is true, we are dealing with something monumental." He promised to start working on the case immediately, but knew that publishing such information would put everyone in great danger. "Stay here until I get back," he said, leaving in a hurry. Jonathan and Emily knew that safety was temporary but trusted Mark's ability to spread the truth. Hours passed like days as they anxiously awaited news. The silence in the hotel room was almost unbearable. Jonathan paced back and forth, while Emily, sitting on the bed, tried to control her anxiety. "What will we do if they find us here?" she asked, her voice full of concern. Jonathan stopped and looked at her. "We will fight, Emily. We have no other choice. The truth needs to come out." Finally, Jonathan's phone rang. It was Mark. "I did it. The article will be live in an hour. You need to leave now. They are coming after you." Jonathan thanked him quickly and hung up. "We need to go, Emily. We have little time." They left the hotel through a side exit, blending into the crowd on the streets. The anonymity of the city was their best defense. They ran through the streets, every shadow a potential threat. They reached a parking lot and stole a car to escape quickly. The road ahead was long and full of uncertainties, but the determination to expose the truth gave them strength. "We will make it," Jonathan said, holding Emily's hand. "We will expose all of this and ensure these atrocities stop." The next day, news of the conspiracy exploded worldwide. Mark had managed to publish the article with all the evidence, and the internet buzzed with discussions, theories, and revelations. Jonathan and Emily hid in a remote location, following the unfolding events through a laptop. The news was clear. Powerful corporations and government agencies were involved in secret human experiments. The revelation shook public opinion. Protests began to emerge in various cities demanding justice and transparency. The corporations mentioned in the article desperately tried to control the damage. Executives gave interviews denying any involvement, but the evidence was irrefutable. Jonathan and Emily watched everything with a mix of relief and apprehension, knowing their fight was far from over. Meanwhile, behind the scenes, the situation became more tense. The government formed a special commission to investigate the allegations, but Jonathan knew that many of those involved had enough power and influence to obstruct justice. In a press conference, the government spokesman promised a transparent and complete investigation, but Jonathan and Emily knew those words were often empty. In their hideout, Jonathan discussed the next steps with Emily and the renegade scientists. "Exposing the truth was just the first step," Jonathan said, his voice grave. "We need to ensure those responsible are brought to justice." Dr. Hayes agreed, but his tone was cautious. "We are dealing with very powerful people, Jonathan. They won't give up easily." Emily, trying to stay calm, suggested they continue gathering more evidence. "We need more information to ensure they can't simply sweep this under the rug." Lara and Michael agreed, deciding to intensify cyber surveillance and track internal communications of the involved corporations. It was a race against time to obtain more evidence before their enemies could react. As the group moved cautiously, avoiding detection, they discovered something even more disturbing. Government agencies not only knew about the experiments, but some were directly involved in overseeing and executing the projects. The connections between corporations and the government were deep, and the motivations dark. Jonathan felt the weight of responsibility increasing. The fight was not just against greedy companies, but against a corrupt state machine. During one of their hacking sessions, Michael found a classified document detailing a comprehensive plan to expand the experiments globally. The document listed countries, leaders, and even specific targets. "This is a large-scale operation," he said, his eyes wide. We are talking about control on an unimaginable scale. Jonathan knew they couldn't do this alone. They needed powerful allies to fight a conspiracy of this magnitude. They decided to contact human rights organizations and renowned investigative journalists. With a new strategy in mind, they began to compile a detailed dossier containing all the evidence they had gathered so far. Jonathan and Emily were getting closer to exposing the full extent of the conspiracy, but with each step forward, the dangers increased. While working with their new allies, the tension grew. They had to be extremely careful, as any mistake could be fatal. However, the real threat came from an unexpected place. One day, while reviewing newly obtained documents in their hideout, Lara Evans, the theoretical physicist, began acting strangely. She seemed anxious and distracted, constantly checking her phone. Jonathan noticed the behavior but didn't comment immediately, believing it was just the stress of the situation. However, that night, everything changed. Jonathan woke up to a muffled sound. He got up silently and found Lara in the middle of the warehouse talking furtively on the phone. "Yes, I have all the information. I am sending the documents now," she whispered. Jonathan felt a chill run down his spine. Lara was betraying the group. Without making a sound, he went back to the room and woke Emily. "We need to get out of here." Now, as they rushed out of the warehouse, Jonathan felt betrayed and furious. Lara, one of the people they trusted the most, had sold all their information. "She was using us the whole time," Emily said, her voice trembling with indignation. "We need to regroup before it's too late." Jonathan agreed, feeling the pressure mounting. They could no longer trust anyone. They fled to a new hideout, an abandoned cabin in the mountains. There, they tried to reorganize their plans and reevaluate their allies. Michael, the brilliant hacker, was visibly shaken by Lara's betrayal. She was always so dedicated. How did we not notice? Jonathan placed a hand on Michael's shoulder. "We don't have time for regrets. We need to focus on the next step." Jonathan and Emily knew that the time had come to confront the corporations and agencies responsible. With the collected evidence and allies gathered, they headed to Global Tech's headquarters, the corporation at the center of the conspiracy. Global Tech's headquarters was an imposing skyscraper, with mirrored glass reflecting the gray sky of a cloudy morning. Emily felt a chill as she looked at the building, but Jonathan's determined presence by her side strengthened her. As they entered the building, Jonathan and Emily were met by security guards who tried to stop them. "We have an appointment with the board of directors," Jonathan said, his voice firm. After rigorous checks, they were led to a conference room on the top floor, where Global Tech executives awaited them. The environment was cold and sterile, with white walls and windows offering a panoramic view of the city. Global Tech CEO, Richard Hargrove, a middle-aged man with an authoritative posture, greeted them with a fake smile. "Dr. Parker, Ms. Thompson, to what do we owe the honor?" Jonathan wasted no time with formalities. "We are here to discuss the human experiments and the conspiracy you tried to hide," he said, placing a folder full of documents on the table. Hargrove remained calm. "I don't know what you are talking about," he replied, looking at the documents with disdain. Emily intervened. "We have irrefutable proof that you are involved in illegal experiments on human beings, using advanced technology for espionage and control." The confidence in her voice challenged Hargrove's coldness, who frowned. Realizing the seriousness of the situation, Jonathan continued, "These documents detail everything: the victims, the procedures, and internal communications. The media is already aware, and public opinion will not side with a corporation that tortures innocent people." The executives around the table began to murmur, the tension visibly growing. Hargrove realized he was losing control of the situation. Suddenly, the conference room door opened, and an elegant woman with a government badge entered. It was Special Agent Rachel Turner from the National Security Agency. "Dr. Parker, Ms. Thompson, come with me. We need to discuss this in a safer environment," she said. Jonathan and Emily exchanged looks, hesitating. "You have to trust me," Turner insisted. Jonathan decided to follow Turner but remained on guard. They were taken to a secure room in the building's basement. Turner explained, We are aware of Global Tech's activities and their connections with government agencies. My mission is to ensure the truth comes to light and that those responsible are brought to justice." Emily breathed deeply, feeling a mix of relief and apprehension. Agent Turner revealed that there was a faction within the government, fighting against corruption and abuse of power. "We are working to dismantle these illegal operations, but we need your help," she said. Jonathan and Emily agreed, knowing this could be the opportunity they had been waiting for to expose the whole truth. With Turner by their side, they returned to the conference room, where Hargrove and the executives were waiting nervously. "The National Security Agency is now involved," Turner announced. "I recommend that you cooperate fully to mitigate legal consequences." The implicit threat was clear, and the executives began to relent, realizing they were at a dead end. With Turner's help, Jonathan and Emily managed to access more incriminating documents and ensured that the information was made public. The pressure on Global Tech and the involved agencies increased daily. Jonathan and Emily knew the battle was far from over, but finally felt they were making significant progress in the fight for justice. In the days that followed, Jonathan and Emily, now working alongside Special Agent Rachel Turner, delved deeply into Global Tech's archives. Each document unearthed revealed more disturbing secrets than the last. One night, while examining a set of confidential files, Jonathan found something that made his heart stop. "Emily, you need to see this," he said, his voice full of incredulity. Emily approached and looked at the screen. The document described experiments with advanced genetic manipulation technology, capable of altering human DNA in ways never seen before. "This is more than espionage. It's the creation of a new human race," she whispered, horrified. Rachel, reading the document, turned pale. "This defies everything we know about biology and genetics. If this is true, Global Tech possesses technology that can change the very essence of what it means to be human." The room fell silent, each of them absorbing the implications of the revelations. Jonathan knew they had to act quickly to prevent this technology from being used for nefarious purposes. In another folder, they found details of a device that could suppress or amplify human emotions through brainwaves. "Imagine what they could do with this," Emily said, her eyes wide with fear. "Mass mind control, manipulation of world leaders. The possibilities are terrifying." The documents also revealed a series of experiments conducted on unsuspecting volunteers who suffered devastating side effects. "They are treating human beings like lab rats," Rachel said, anger evident in her voice. "This has to stop." Jonathan and Emily agreed, determined to expose all the atrocities they discovered. Among the files, there were also correspondences showing collusion between Global Tech and high-ranking government officials, who not only knew about the experiments, but also supported them in exchange for political and economic benefits. With each new revelation, the urgency to act grew. Jonathan and Emily knew they couldn't wait any longer. They needed to expose these secrets to the world before it was too late. "We need a plan," Rachel said, her mind already working on possible strategies. "And we need more allies. This fight cannot be won by just the three of us." Jonathan, Emily, and Rachel began contacting renowned scientists, trusted journalists, and human rights leaders, sharing the evidence and asking for support. The group grew, and with it, the hope that they could dismantle Global Tech and stop these terrible experiments. Jonathan and Emily were meeting with their allies in an improvised hall of an old library, now a command center. The air was charged with tension and anticipation. Maps, documents, and laptops covered the large oak table. Jonathan looked at each face present, feeling the weight of responsibility. "We are about to make history," he said, his voice firm. "What we have discovered can change the world forever." Emily, by his side, held Jonathan's hand. "We need to make sure this information reaches everyone," she said, her eyes shining with determination. "We cannot let those in power suppress the truth. Humanity needs to know what is at stake." There was a murmur of agreement in the room. Everyone knew they were on the brink of a revolution. With the help of Rachel Turner and the journalists, a plan was formulated to release the information simultaneously on various media platforms and social networks. Michael, the hacker, prepared the systems to withstand the impact and prevent any attempted censorship. "We have a small window of time," he warned. "We need to be quick and precise." The hour of disclosure approached. Jonathan and Emily were in an improvised control room, surrounded by screens showing different communication channels. "It's time," Jonathan said, feeling adrenaline coursing through his veins. "Let the world know the truth." With a nod, Michael initiated the global broadcast. The revelation of the information exploded like a bomb worldwide. Protests took to the streets, demanding justice and transparency. Global Tech's headquarters were surrounded by protesters and journalists, while executives desperately tried to save their careers and freedom. Jonathan, Emily, and Rachel Turner watched from an improvised control room, feeling the wave of change they had helped initiate. With global attention focused on the conspiracy, governments and international organizations began to act. The National Security Agency, now pressured by public opinion and its own members who supported the truth, launched a series of operations to arrest those involved. Rachel coordinated with her field teams, ensuring no culprit escaped. "We are going after the big fish," she said, determined. The arrests began. Global Tech executives, corrupt scientists, and government officials were detained in simultaneous operations. Each arrest brought a mix of relief and justice to Jonathan and Emily. "Finally, they are paying for their crimes," Jonathan said, watching a live broadcast from a high-security prison. Emily, holding his hand, felt that the fight was worth it. One of the most symbolic arrests was that of Richard Hargrove, Global Tech's CEO. He was captured in his luxurious mansion, trying to destroy evidence. Jonathan and Emily watched as he was handcuffed and taken away under heavy guard. "Justice is being done," Emily said, her eyes shining with the light of hope. Hargrove, once untouchable, now faced the consequences of his actions. As the network of corruption was dismantled, more secrets came to light. Investigations revealed documents and testimonies linking the criminal organization to a series of atrocities. Each new discovery reinforced the extent and gravity of the crimes committed. Jonathan and Emily continued to work tirelessly, ensuring that every detail was exposed and that all victims received justice. In court, sessions were broadcast live, with impactful testimonies from experiment survivors and experts corroborating the evidence. Jonathan was called to testify, and his presence brought credibility and emotion to the case. "We are not just here to judge the guilty," he said in his testimony. "We are here to ensure this never happens again." The silence in the courtroom was deep, everyone absorbing the gravity of his words. With the dismantling of the criminal organization, a new chapter began. Institutions were reformed, and new laws were implemented to prevent future abuses of power. Jonathan and Emily, now public figures and advocates for scientific ethics, continued to work for a better future. "We did it," Emily said, hugging Jonathan. "But the vigilance must continue." The thrilling conclusion of the story was marked by a ceremony where Jonathan, Emily, and Rachel were honored for their efforts. Amidst the applause, Jonathan looked at Emily and knew that despite all the hardships, they had achieved something monumental. "This is just the first victory of many," he whispered. Together they faced the impossible and changed the course of history, proving that truth and justice can prevail, even against the darkest forces. If you enjoyed the incredible story of Jonathan and Emily, subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss any of our upcoming videos. If you love thrilling chronicles and want to support our channel to continue bringing more quality content, consider contributing through Buy Me a Coffee. The link is in the first pinned comment. Your help is essential for us to keep improving. Thank you for your support. See you in the next thrilling chronicle.